90s, I would open up the newspaper on the weekend, and there would be a picture of what looked like squiggles and glitches. And it was called Magic Eye or Stereogram. And I looked at it a few minutes and I still saw squiggles and glitches. But then I read below, look past this drawing as if it was a reflection in a shop window. And almost immediately, a shark popped out of the picture at me. And I think analogously, the Octatrack can be that way. You can stare at the buttons all over the front of it when you first get it and miss the simplicity of it that will pop out at you by doing this small project that I'll lead you through. And hopefully the logic of it will pop out at you. The Octatrack is a sample player, mangler, mixer with effects, MIDI sequencer, so you can play melodies and chords by playing samples chromatically, and of course it can be a drum machine. So we're going to do a little cover here of a simple house tune that I really like by Marko Lazovic, the Dreadworks. And I think creating this will be a great introduction to how this device functions. We are going to do all this with one single sample, and the sample contains the drum sounds, the house chord, and an oscillator from the SH-101 we're going to play with. And using the filter and envelope shaping of the Octatrack, we're going to make that into the bass sound. And as always, the sample is free to members of my Patreon. And over on my Patreon, you can find free patches for many VSTs and synthesizers that I have featured in my videos. The first thing is to get the sample into the Octatrack. So what you do is you go under Project, System, over to USB disk mode and hit Yes. You should see an icon on your desktop of the internal drive of the Octatrack. So this will give us a chance to look at the Octatrack filing structure. And I'll explain what you see here. Electron has, at its highest level of filing, the set. And you could think of that kind of as a memory sector. And so if you want to operate within the original set and never make another set, you could do that. Or you can, every time you do another album, you could make a new set and have a completely different set of samples that you're using and things like that. And so I made a second set or memory sector within the Octatrack memory card called Digifx, but I haven't really used it. I've pretty much stuck with the original Electron set, which was called presets. And also you see in here the file for updating the OS of the Octatrack, which currently it says 1.4. So if I go into the main set that I tend to always use, presets, they're in alphabetical order, but this audio folder is different. This is the audio pool, as Electron calls. And so all of your samples will go in there. The other folders in here are projects. So every time you make a new song, you could make a new project in here. I kind of use these as templates. I've got a Boards of Canada template, Lone template, etc., the TUS template. But when you receive your Octatrack, it has one called presets. That is the project that has a bunch of Electron demo patterns. But if I double click on the audio pool, which is where all of our sounds go, you can see all of my basic sounds. I've got all my vintage drums in there. And so I'm going to take the Marko Octatrack tutorial wave file and I'm going to put that in the audio folder. And I'm going to eject that Octatrack internal drive. And it looks like the Octatrack on its own just went back to the main screen. Let's start by making a new project, and you'll probably do this every time you make a new song. You hit project, and you use these arrow buttons here to navigate over to the right to where it says change. Hit yes as a type of enter button. And go up to create empty project and hit yes. The Octatrack has a really good menu system for naming, and it creates kind of a random project there. You can use that as the name if you want to, but the way you get rid of that and start over is by function no, and keep hitting no or hold it down, and it gets rid of the name that's there. Then by pushing on function and using the arrows, you can choose any name you want. Then hit yes. Now the Octatrack has 8 tracks, and those are designated by these 8 buttons on either side of the display. We're going to start out working with track 1. So you hit it and it turns red, and that lets you know that it's selected. Double click the SRC button, and you have to tell the Octatrack what you want to use this track for. And you see that there are 5 possible functions there. Static, flex through, neighbor pickup. Well, in this tutorial, we are primarily going to use flex for all of them. And flex is a flexible sample player. So hit yes, and now you see flex highlighted, and that means that it's selected. And notice off to the right here are 6 blocks, and those correspond to your 6 encoders over here on the right. We're going to take encoder B here and turn it, and it turns slice on. And you want to turn that on if you intend to slice up your sample into individual hits and have it spread across the keys. And that's what we're going to do later. And the way you exit menus on the Octatrack is by hitting no until you come back out to the main screen. And you can see at the bottom it says SRC Flex. And so now we need to put the sample on that track and then slice it up. So double click on the track button and go down to slot 1 and hit the right arrow. Go down to Marco Octatrack tutorial wave, and we can hit yes, and that puts that into slot 1. And if we want to hear that sample, we can hold down function and hit yes. Now hit the audio editor button, and you can see the visual representation of the wave file. And you'll note that there are menu choices at the bottom: trim, slice, edit, attribute, and file. And those correspond to these 5 buttons. So if we hit the FX button, it will be to select attribute. And go down to time stretch, and using the left arrow, turn that off. And that will ensure that with changing tempos, the quality doesn't go down. Back to the audio editor and select amp. And you see that by selecting amp, we're choosing slice. And hit yes. And it gives you some options now that you can use the arrows to choose. You can add a slice here, delete all the slices, create the slicing grid, etc. Well, we're going to add slices one at a time. So hit yes to add slice there. Now you see something new on the screen. You see a start and end point. And so you can use your A and C encoder to change the start and end point. Well, D and F encoders as zoom and E as scroll. And there's little gray text below each of these encoders. So to zoom in, you can do that. Turn encoder F. And you see that we're not quite at the end of that sample. And the start point is not right either. So I'll use A to change the start point. And you can hit function yes to test that out. So I can use C encoder to adjust the endpoint. And we use the level encoder to move the cursor. So move the cursor to the second sample, which is the snare, and do the same thing again. We hit yes and yes again to add slice here. And now we're working on the snare. Function yes to listen to it. And so we do that for all the drum sounds. So now we have all of our slices done. And by using the right and left arrows, we can arrow through the slices. And so there's slice 1. Hit function yes. You can hear that that's the kick. Slice 2, the snare. 3, the closed hat. 4, the open hat. 5, the rim tap. 6, the cowbell. And now we want those spread across the Trig keys so we can play it like a drum machine. So by going back to main, by hitting no and hitting function up, we see another menu. Hold function down while you're messing with this, where you could choose tracks, chromatic, slots, slices, and so forth. So here you'll choose slices, and you see all those buttons turn green. And so now all the slices have been placed on the buttons like a drum machine. And so we're getting ready to record a pattern now. And so we need to think about the tempo. And by hitting this tempo button, we set that at 135 using level encoder. And you might want a metronome. Now you can quickly get the metronome by hitting function mix, and it turns metronome on, function mix, metronome off. But you might want more settings of the metronome, and for that you hit project and go down to control and then metronome. Hit yes, and you'll see that we can turn it on and off there using the arrow in the normal way that you'd select checkboxes in a menu. But also you can see it happen when you hold down the function and hit mix. You see the metronome box checking and unchecking. And there you can make other settings. One that you might want to consider is the volume of the metronome. Another consideration before recording is the track length, and we want it to be 64 steps. So by hitting function page, you can scale your pattern using the level encoder and make it 64 steps. And now, before we record any information into the tracks, we can kind of see where we're headed with this. We're going to put the kick on track 1, snare track 2, open and closed hat on track 3. So we don't need separate track for both because the open and closed hat never play at the same time. And then 4 we can do rim tap, 5 we can do cowbell. And so we can copy track 1 to 2 through 5. To copy track 1 to the other tracks, you make sure track 1 is selected, it'll be red, and you hit the record button to put yourself in grid recording mode. And then when you hit function copy, it will say copy track on the screen. Then you go to track 2 and you hit function paste, and it pastes the track. And you do that for 1 through 5. Now I've already recorded mine, so I'm going to take you through how to record it, and I'm going to hold down function and mute the other tracks. So I'm only listening to the kick. So the kick pattern is, and we can just punch that in. Go ahead and hit record and hold record down and hit play, and then your buttons are available. If you just hit record and then play, you see that it's not doing that same type of function. It's more of a thing where you enter in notes manually. So we'll hold down record and hit play. Then we've got the buttons right there, and we're coming up to the 1. And there's the kick pattern. Then I'm going to go ahead and function unmute 2. As I said, mine was pre-recorded, but I'm going to delete out the snares that are in there. 2 is the track I have selected. And with the record button on, I'm at the level of clear where I'm just clearing out trigs. So function clear, I've just cleared the trigs out only. And so now by holding down record and hitting play, I've got my buttons there. I can play my snare in. And something was a little off there. So what do you do about that when you don't really want to play it over, but something's a little off? You can hit the record button. Now we're in grid recording mode, and we can page through and see what went wrong. And we see that on the 3rd page there, we've got, well, on the 2nd page, we've got a trig there on 6, and it should be on 5. And when entering that trig, we need to hold it down and tell it which slice. And that'll be up here in the 2nd box, which corresponds to B. And so we'll tell it play slice 2 on that trig. And that should fix it. Sounds good. Now we're at the stage where we've got enough in there that we can get rid of the metronome, which I find a little irritating. But if you like it, you can keep it on. So by function mix, you can turn it immediately off. Now here it gets a little harder to enter manually by just hitting record. You can now add trigs and just add the first 8 trigs for the hi-hat. Make sure your track 3 is red, so it's the track that you're working on. And hold down 1 through 8 and select slice 3 for those. Go to page 2. Page 2, number 8, will be slice 4, which is the open hat. Then it's just 1 through 8 again with slice 1. And then on page 4, you actually have 2 open hat hits. One on 8 should be slice 4. I accidentally hit 9 there. And on 11 should be slice 4. And this is what we got. Now track 4, which was the cowbell. These are where the cowbells fall, starting with 1. 2, 3, none, and page 4. That's where your cowbells fall. You'll notice that the cowbell has a little reverb on it. And so let's talk about effects for a second. You have 2 effects available, FX1 and 2. And double click on the first one there and you can see what it has available. There's no reverb available on that one. And FX2 does have a reverb. It has the plate reverb, and you can use these settings. And once you have the plate reverb chosen, note that the 6 blocks here again align with the encoders, and you can set the time, the mix, and so forth. So I've got the time of 62, the mix 45. And on to the rim tap. Rim tap probably hard to enter manually, so let me show you where the hits are. There's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and of course when you place the hits you'll hold down and you'll select slice 5. And with the others together, here's what we've got. So now we get to the house chord, which we're going to put on track 6. Let's set the sample up a little differently for that. So let's double click on track 6. Let's put the sample this time in a different slot. It doesn't matter which one of these numbers you use. I've put the sample on slot 3 this time, and we're going to set the sample up a little differently. And we're going to play it chromatically instead of playing it like a drum machine. So we're going to play it more like a keyboard. So going to the audio editor, we set up going to slice, and we use level to get to the start of that house chord. Function yes, you can hear it. And back out to main menu, hitting function up. And we see that menu again. Hold down function. And this time go to chromatic. And now we see a representation of the musical keyboard. The lit buttons being the white keys, the unlit ones being the black keys. So now we can play it chromatically. And you could change the octave by function up arrow. You could also manually put it in there by putting a trig on first page on 1 and setting the pitch here using encoder A at 0, and page 3, put the pitch at +2. And so now with everything, here's what we have. And you probably hear a little reverb on that, so let's show you the reverb settings. I've got a 127 time and a mix of 60 on the house chord. And now to talk about the bass line, which is getting a little bit more into the features of the Octatrack and the filter and so forth. So track 7 is going to be the bass sound, and I just recorded the oscillator with no filtering or anything out of my SH-101. And so we need to slice out the 1 sample. And so just like the house chord, put this sample in a different slot the same way. Slice it the same way we did the others. So now you just have a single slice. Function up, and we can play it chromatically, the 1 slice, to play the bass line. But when you slice it, here's what you get. And when you play the trigs in, you're going to get this. So it's the filter of the Octatrack that turns that into that cool bass sound. And let's double tap amp, and we see the amp setup. And so you want amp on re-trigger, and we'll put the attack on linear, sync off, and FX1 on re-trigger, so that every time a trig, the FX1 envelope will be re-triggered in here. The filter is an effect, so you double click FX1 and select filter. And you see you've got a high pass filter possibility, low pass filter, an envelope to use with the filter, and set the hold off cue to both and distortion all the way down. And then I'm going to hit FX1 one time, and we see 6 blocks here that correspond again to the encoders. And the way you select between high pass filter and low pass filter is by using the base and the width. And so with a base of 0 and a width of 127, we're using the low pass filter. And it's the width that you could think of as your filter frequency dial. And so if I play that and adjust the width, you hear kind of a filter frequency operating. The Q is the resonance. So let's turn that to about 61. And you can hear the filter operation a little, it's a little more SH-101 like. A little more acidity. And so to make this envelope have a dramatic effect and make that kind of a wow sound on the bass sound, we'll turn the width, which is considered to be the filter frequency, all the way down to 0. And so now this envelope is going to raise and lower the frequency with every trigger. And you can see how that's working. So the filter's closed and the envelope is kicking it open. And there's the resonance as the Q. For more acidity sound or less. And with everything together, and now let's talk about how to turn it into a song. And you do that by arranging. So you've got a complete pattern with all the sounds in it. Now you can just drop out certain parts and make other patterns, and then you can, using the arrange button there, you can arrange it into a song. So you just hit play and have the whole song play out. And so without record on, if I hit function copy, it says copy pattern. Now I go pattern 11. Now I'm in pattern 11 and I go function paste. So now when I hold down pattern, I see that there is a pattern 11 now. Select that. See, it's lit up now. And that will be the complete pattern. And I could take some part of it out. I could, since I'm in pattern 11, I could light up record and take, say, the bass line out, which is selected right now. It's track 7. And if I went function clear, then now I don't have a bass line in there. Take the kick out. And so by having different patterns on each of the buttons, now I can arrange those patterns. So I go into arrange mode and you see on the screen edit. And so you highlight that, hit yes. But it says arrangement is empty. Press function down to insert row. So I insert a row there. And you can see how you could use the cursor going left and right to decide what pattern is next. So I could have pattern 1 by using the level. Could have pattern 1 there and then hit function down. And then I can have pattern 2 play. and then have my arrangement end. And we'll hit function arrange, and a red light is lit up there. And you can see the cursor going down as it plays the different patterns. Gets to the end of the arrangement and stops. To get out of that, just hit function arrange again, and the red light goes out. Now you're back to normal, just working on your song. So that was the very basics of it. And I have a few more advanced tutorials for, when we were going into the track and we double-clicked SRC and we saw the different machines. I have some other tutorials where we talk about through, which is running, say, your base station 2 into the Octatrack and how to mix that in and control it with the MIDI tracks, which we didn't talk about on the Octatrack. So that would be using these 8 tracks to run MIDI devices, and that would be considered more advanced. And I do have those tutorials if you want to check those out. Again, this sample that we used in this is available to my patrons on my Patreon, and I'll put a link for that in the description. Hope you enjoyed this. See you next time.